Hi friends, welcome to my channel. Today I am going to be doing a long overdue September and October wrap up. Basically the last few months have been super busy. I had mentioned in my September TBR or August wrap up, one of the two, that I was in for a very busy September with grad school work and moving, and basically that just lasted through September, through October, and I did not get a chance to just sit down and film. I always had homework or work to do for my actual job, or just getting settled in the new place took me a little bit, but I am now pretty much settled. Now I'm decorating for Christmas, and work has actually gotten, as of today, crazy again because we're switching more stuff because of COVID. We're kind of going back into more work from home stuff. And grad school has not slowed down at all. If anything, it's just gotten worse. But I have gotten the chance to like schedule in some filming days because this brings me joy and I want to do more of what brings me joy. I've definitely been falling into a little bit of a seasonal depression trap. I was really down for about 2 weeks. I wasn't reading. I really wasn't doing much of anything, and that really showed in my September wrap up. I just couldn't bother myself to read at all. So it's been so nice to be out of that and to be feeling better and more excited to read and to film. So instead of rambling on some more, I am going to show you the long overdue wrap up of what I read in September and October. So September was Becca's book-oplathon, and I'm going to be honest, I did not accomplish near as much as I wanted to. I did not accomplish my own little goals of like what I was going to read. If you've seen my September's TBR, you will see that I have started this new thing where I have 7 different categories of books and types of books: library books, new books, backlist books, that I am trying to make sure I read at least one of per month. I didn't even accomplish that in September. I just was in a huge slump, a huge depressive slump. So a lot of it rolled over to October, but I am happy to say that I did accomplish everything I wanted to accomplish in October, which is good. So to kick it off, the first book I read in September was He Started It by Samantha Downing. This book has gotten such mixed reviews. The amount of people who said that they absolutely hated it, I was very hesitant about starting it. But I honestly really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I read it in about a day and a half. This was before my slump set in, and I sat down and I couldn't put it down. I absolutely loved it. It's about a group of siblings who really don't see much of each other anymore, but once their grandfather dies, they are forced to go on a road trip together to scatter his ashes, and this is basically the like only hoop they have to jump through in order to get their inheritance, because he was a very well-off man, and all of them have secrets and all of them need the money for different reasons, and it takes off from there. Our main character, Samantha Downing, does such an amazing job of creating just purely unlikable characters. Like, I absolutely loved our narrator just because it was like, I'm kind of a shitty person. And I was like, okay, cool. There were twists and things I did not see coming, things that I kind of saw coming, but then totally just like went out a completely different direction than I was expecting, and the ending of this novel just, I loved it. So many people said that they hated the ending, and so many people said that they hated the characters and thought it was so boring, and I was having a good time the whole way through. I like road trip books, I like inheritance stories, so this was really fun for me, so I gave it 4 stars. It wasn't a perfect thriller, but it was pretty good. Next up, one of the books I pulled out of my TBR jar was Presence: Bringing Your Boldest Self to Your Biggest Challenges by Amy Cuddy. I actually listened to this on audio as I was building an IKEA dresser. This was fine. I gave this 3 stars. I think a lot of this is, I don't want to say basic, but kind of. And at moments I was really just zoning out really bad. Like, obviously I was concentrating on building this damn dresser, but there were moments that I was just like, I don't think I care. I have heard the main points of this book other places, like doing the superwoman or the Superman pose in the mirror before you have to do things, having an elevator pitch ready and things like that. And they're helpful to an extent. This was actually given to me by my mom when I was in college and kind of very uncertain of myself and, you know, growing up and being out on my own and, you know, dealing with insecurity, and she thought this would help me, and she basically gave me like the main bullet points of what this book was. When I drew it out of my TBR jar and I listened to it, I was kind of like, okay, that was fine, but 3 stars, it was fine. Next up on audio, I was able to read I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness by Austin Channing Brown. I loved this. I gave this 5 stars. This was a super, super quick audiobook. I listened to it while I was unpacking, but it was purely like just so engaging. Unlike Presence, where I was doing other things while listening to it, but I was just not really engaging with the work at all. This, I was so engaged the whole time. I was putting my closet together basically and unpacking all of my clothes, but I would just stop every once in a while to just sit and listen to what she was saying. I absolutely love this. I would highly, highly recommend it to everyone because it's just very just poignant, I guess. She does a great job in explaining, you know, like bigger ideas about racism and microaggressions and things like that, but then also giving such personal details and personal stories that that really hit me in a way that was just very striking, and I just really connected with this book. I really enjoyed it, and I gave this 5 stars. The other book that I pulled out of my TBR jar in September, I think it was kind of punishing me, but also being like, you need to finish some of your videos that you've started, was Landline by Rainbow Rowell. I gave this 3 stars. It's fine. I personally just don't feel the need to read a lot of Rainbow Rowell's books anymore, or, you know, seek them out. I already owned this one. I'd had it a while, so it was on my TBR jar. It was also part of my reading my 5 lowest rated books on Goodreads on my TBR. It was fine. It's about a woman who, it's Christmas time and she has to stay home for work while her husband and her children go to his parents' house for Christmas, and she basically ends up discovering a time-traveling phone where she can call the past. There were cute moments in this. There were moments where there were moments where things started to connect that I appreciated. I listened to a lot of this. Actually, I think I listened to almost all of this on audio, and it was fine. I wasn't mad at it. It just wasn't great, and I'm gonna forget about it pretty quickly. Next up for my series continuation in September, I read Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. I gave this 4 stars, and honestly, my memory of reading the Percy Jackson series is pretty negative. I don't want to say that I didn't think it deserved the hype, but I did feel that a lot of its hype and love was nostalgic in nature. But after reading it, I was like, this was a lot of fun. I think I've grown to really like middle grade in this year, and I have a much bigger appreciation for middle grade than I used to. And I actually really enjoyed it. I had a really fun time rereading this, and I'm looking forward to continuing it. And actually, it made me want to pick up Rick Riordan's other works more, because after reading, I didn't ever finish Percy Jackson. I got to the 3rd or the 4th one and stopped, which is why it's on my series continuation list. But I never felt the need to continue with Rick Riordan, and now I'm feeling a lot more positively toward the whole series, which is good. And then the last book I read in September was my rereads for September. I was supposed to read more Harry Potter. I was not in the mood for it, so I picked up something short and sweet and middle grade, and that is Dave at Night by Gail Carson Levine. This is the same author who wrote Ella Enchanted. I don't ever think I read Bella Enchanted as a child, but I have the distinct memory of finding this at the Scholastic Book Fair when I was in 5th grade, and it was on sale for like $5, and I was like, heck yes. I was a bargain shopper even then. I was like, my mom gave me $20. If I find a bunch of $5 books, I can buy more books. Thus this. And I ended up loving this book as a kid. I would read it under my desk when I hated being read to as a child. Pretty much as soon as I could read myself, I didn't want to be read to. So in 5th grade, after recess, when my teacher would read like Binoculars and stuff to us, I was reading this under my desk and getting in trouble. I didn't like being read to. But I really enjoyed this. It's about a boy named Dave whose father dies and his stepmother has to give up him and his brother. His brother goes to live with a family member, but because Dave is a troublemaker, he is sent to an orphanage where he one night escapes and finds a party going on. This is set in the 1920s and it's cool. I have read a lot of reviews since rereading this that said this was boring and really didn't have a point, and I can appreciate that. But I think even in my little prepubescent mind, I really enjoyed reading about the 1920s. I think it's a very fascinating time. The different social aspects going on, the different economic aspects going on, but still like this interesting like party lifestyle that was going on at the beginning of the 1920s. I believe this is the 1920s. I could be totally wrong. It has that feel, but I liked it a lot. And I still liked it. I gave it 5 stars. It stood up for me. I understand why this isn't popular, but I loved it. Next up, we have the book that was supposed to be my new release for September. I started it in September, but I was not able to finish it, and it rolled over into October, and that was Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. This was a 3-star for me. I found this really boring, and I wanted to enjoy it more. The first probably like 100 or so pages, I was more into it, but I also understood that it was taking me forever to read. So I obviously wasn't that engaged. Like, I would get excited about little insights that we got from Edward's perspective, but I also felt like this was so insanely long. And it makes sense. He doesn't sleep. There were moments where time passed quicker for Bella because, you know, she was asleep, or she did not know what was happening with Edward, so she didn't narrate a whole week, where with him, it was like, this is what Edward was doing. It's just like a 650-page book. It just, I don't know. It's everything that we already know is going to happen, and you know what's going to happen, and it is kind of interesting to see his perspective. I don't think it needed to be this long, and honestly there were aspects of him and his thoughts that just pissed me off, like a lot. Like the I don't know if it's manipulation. Maybe, no, it's not really manipulation. It's like the lying that is involved in this book that sets up for New Moon, which, like, fine, I mean, kind of spoilers, but like whatever. There's lying at the end of this book where Edward is just straight up lying to Bella. And when I read Twilight, I didn't read it as Edward lying to Bella. So reading it as Edward lying to Bella so many times, like so many times, from like the second she's in the hospital on, he just like lies to her about like being with her, and it did not sit well with me. It made me kind of angry and pissed off, and it made me feel like New Moon was more calculated than it seemed, and I just wish she would stop writing books about Twilight. I think we need to let it go. It needs to sit by itself and be a nostalgic element of history that maybe I reread once every few years or something to just see how I feel about it. This didn't need to be this long. It didn't have to happen, but it really didn't need to be this long. So the ebook that I was supposed to read for September, but it rolled into October, was Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky by Kwame Mabalia. This I read for grad school, which is funny to say, but I go to school for basically youth services librarianship, so I take a class about children's literature, and we are reading middle grade. This is a Rick Riordan Presents novel, and it focuses exclusively on African folk tales and figures from African folk tales, and I loved that aspect of that a lot. I found it so interesting just to learn about some of the different characters, like Gum Baby and things like that. There were some that I had heard of before, but sparingly, whereas this brought life to so many different characters that I had never heard of, or that I had just, like, you learn a short story and then you move on. So that was really, really interesting. I did give it 3 stars. It reads a lot like Percy Jackson. It's in a similar vein to Percy Jackson in that we have this kid named Tristan who is not quite as much of a troublemaker, but he's a little bit of a family disappointment, and he is sent off to live with his grandparents for the summer, and he discovers a different world. It's really action-packed, and it's really long. I think the thing that I think what hindered my enjoyment of it was that it was very much a back-to-back adventure, and there was not a break, which works for some people, but I don't read a lot of adventure-based novels, Percy Jackson being some of the only ones I read. But I think with Percy Jackson, it is a good bit shorter than Tristan Strong, so I could read Percy Jackson, be done, and, you know, be finished with it, whereas Tristan Strong, I was like, oh my gosh, we have another quest within the quest, and I understand we had to wrap up all the loose ends and stuff, but there was a part of me that was like, this could have been 2 books. So if you really like longer middle grade that kind of digs in a little bit more, I think you'd really enjoy it. It's just not quite my thing. Middle grade adventure, I struggled to get in with, but I did really love the characters and learning about the different African folk figures. It was really cool. Next up, I listened to How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. 5 stars. Loved this book. Was just so heavy and important, and just so well done. Just so very well done, and I just appreciated so much of what he talked about. I would highly recommend. I think a lot of people are reading this book this year, which is great. I think we need to continue that. We need to continue reading from Black authors and discussing social justice in our country and in the world, and he just brings up so many important things. There were aspects to it that I was like, wow, I had never thought of that, and we should all be learning every day and taking the efforts to learn every day, and I just really enjoyed it. Next up, we have another middle grade novel. This was May Be by Caroline Starr Rose. This was a middle grade novel written in verse, and I truly enjoyed this novel. I gave it 5 stars. It is about a young girl named May Be who lives on the Western Prairie with her family, and they're not doing so well. So they basically send her to be a housekeeper, a wife's assistant to this couple that is miles and miles and miles away from her family, and she obviously doesn't want to go, and things happen, and she ends up alone and stranded on the prairie, which is terrifying because she's like 10, 12, I can't quite remember. She's young, and it was really, really well done. I really have discovered how much I love novels in verse this year. I truly thought I hated all poetry and would never have liked a novel in verse. This year has proven me so wrong. I enjoyed this so much, and I gave it 5 stars. Next up in October, I read Final Girls by Riley Sager. I gave this 5 stars. I enjoyed this. I love Riley Sager's writing so much. You can really tell that this is his first thriller novel, and you can really tell that he's kind of cultivating his voice in this one. There were moments that I was like, this does not feel like a Riley Sager novel. Like, it felt like he was still trying to find his rhythm in point at parts, and then there were other parts where it was like, now this is Riley Sager. I'm struggling to put my preference for Riley Sager novels in order. Rating them is hard for me. I know my favorite is probably, see, that's the thing. I feel like my favorites are The Last Time I Lied and Home Before Dark. and I'm not sure which one wins. I'd have to reread them. And then I know my like second place is Lock Every Door and Final Girls. So I'm not sure how I would actually rate them, or rank them, but I enjoyed this a lot. It is about a girl who is the lone survivor of this attack in the woods. She goes with her friends while she's in college, and she's the only one who makes it out alive, and we follow her years later as she's one of the final girls. And we basically follow her years later when things start to get pretty bad again. And I really liked it. I love the way Riley Sager crafts his characters. I just enjoy his work so much. So now I don't have any more Riley Sager to read, and I have to wait for his next one, which is coming. He announced it, which is exciting. But next up, another middle grade. I read this as my series continuation for October. It is The Last Life of Prince Alistair, which is the second book in the Prosper Redding duology. This was fun. I enjoyed this. I'm actually pretty sure I enjoyed it a lot more than on audio than I would have if I'd read the physical book. I read the first one a few years ago now, and I was kind of bored. Honestly, I was kind of bored. It's about a boy named Prosper Redding who lives in Massachusetts, and he finds out that his great-great-grandfather, one of his ancestors, made a deal with this demon that basically all of his ancestors will serve this demon, and that he will basically take the one of his ancestors and basically just possess him, kind of. And so Prosper Redding has this little demon that talks to him, that lives in his brain and can speak through him and things. And the second one is the continuation, so I can't really tell you too much about that one. It's been a very long time since I've read the first one, and to be honest, I couldn't quite remember the premise. They were talking about people and I was like, who? I don't remember who that is, but it was fine. It was a fun time. I gave it a 3-star. Not my absolute favorite, but it definitely wasn't bad. Next up, we have One by One by Ruth Ware. This book has an unfair reputation. This book is a lot of fun. This book is not the twisty, crazy, shocking thrillers of recent history. This is much more classic mystery, classic whodunit, classic, like, there are only 7 people that the murderer could be. And I love that. I truly enjoy that. That's like some Agatha Christie shit, and it's fun. I really appreciated this because it is guessable. It is something you can predict. It isn't something where you're like, oh my god, I never would have gotten that. That was such a crazy, out of left field twist. Wow. Which is fun. I'm not saying that's bad. Those are really fun too. This is fun in a completely different way. I have never understood the idea that if I can predict it, it's like a 2-star book. I freaking love predicting thrillers. I absolutely love it when I'm like, ooh, I bet this is what's going on. I don't think, oh my god, I'm so disappointed that I called that from a mile away, because the whole time I'm questioning myself. I'm guessing. There are reviews of this that says I guessed the murderer within the first like 10 chapters, and probably even sooner than that. And you know, it wasn't surprising, blah, blah, blah. I loved this. I had a lot of fun. And honestly, I had my own hunch about who the killer was, but there were moments where I was questioning myself. There were moments where I was like, wait, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's this person, or maybe it's this person, and this person has a motive. And that's so fun. So honestly, I would still recommend this book a lot. I liked it a hell of a lot more than The Death of Mrs. Westaway. Still my least favorite Ruth Ware. I just don't like it. I liked this a hell of a lot more than that. It's not Turn of the Key, but it's still really good, and I really enjoyed it. Next up, we have another book that I really enjoyed, and I'm surprised I gave this 4 stars, but I guess it wasn't perfect, and that is Katherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. Another book that has such a bad rep, and I don't get it because it's so fun. I love this book. It is so character-based. It is so atmospheric. It has very little plot, And I loved it the whole time. There is a blurb on the front by Rory Power that basically says it's like it fills you with dread from the first page, and it is so true, because I honestly felt this like never-ending feeling of dread the whole time while reading it. I just felt like this heavy pressure and like, oh God, the whole time. The way Elizabeth Thomas has written this is so beautifully and just well done, and I absolutely loved it because it was just so well crafted. The atmosphere in this book is ridiculous. It is dark academia to a T. It is about a school that isn't really a university. It's you get degrees, but you basically go to the school for 3 years, you sign up, and you cannot communicate with the outside world. You can't have a phone, you can't bring books from outside. Everything is Katherine House all the time. And there are lots of secrets and things that aren't made clear, and I loved every second of it. I loved the ending. I just loved all of it. I gave it a 4-star. It wasn't totally perfect because there were moments where I was like, you know, I kind of wish I'd have gone in a different direction, but I still loved it. I would still highly recommend it, especially if you like weird-ass books, and I love weird-ass books, and this just fit the bill perfectly. And the last 3 books I read in October are all middle grade. Another book for school that I read was Look Both Ways, a tale told in 10 blocks by Jason Reynolds. This is a book told in 10 tales, 10 blocks. It is 10 different kids who get out of school, and we follow them on their way home and the different things that they get up to and that they're thinking about. I listened to the audiobook for this, and I'm really glad I did. It's a full cast, so it was just really cool and well done. I enjoyed it. I read a lot of reviews that were like, it's not the best Reynolds. It's definitely not the best Reynolds, but it's good. I gave it a 4-star. I really enjoyed it. I liked hearing other characters that we'd heard about mentioned later on, just in like passing. I liked really how it shows that everyone has their own path home from school and also in life, and that they're all struggling with their own stuff. And I think it's a really good way to show kids that you may think something is going on with a person, you may think they're a bully, but if you were to go home with them, you might learn a lot about who they are and what they're dealing with in their own home life. So really liked that, enjoyed it a lot. 4 stars. And to complete my October reads, I had to read a book. I still should have read Harry Potter, but I still didn't feel like it, and I didn't have time. So I read the first 2 books in the Spiderwick Chronicles, or I reread them rather. I loved these when I was a kid. The first one is called The Field Guide, and the second is called The Seeing Stone. It follows 3 siblings, Jared, Simon, and Mallory. They move into this really old house that belonged to their grandfather, and some things start to happen, and it has a lot to do with fairies and this field book, the field guide that they find that their grandfather created. I loved this book. I started reading this when I was like in 2nd grade. My media specialist recommended it to me, and I was like, I don't think so, but she was like, give it a try. And I came back and I was like, okay, I need the next one. And she was like, I told you. I love these. My mom, my brother and I used to read them together, and they're just really fun. And they were just the perfect amount of like kind of scary for me when I was, 7. So loved these. These were really, I still just love them. They're like 100 pages each. They're really quick. They get to the point. They're a lot of fun, and I really like them. I gave them both 5 stars, mostly for nostalgia, but I like them. These are by Tony DeLorizzi and Holly Black. So those are all of the books that I read in September and October. I definitely wanted to have a more successful time. I think if I had not fallen into such a reading slump in September, October would have been more successful because I wouldn't have had to catch up so much. But thank you guys so much for watching. Comment, like, subscribe, all the normal stuff, and I'll see you guys again super soon, hopefully. Bye!